Okay, today is a really interesting episode because we actually we're doing something we have never done before, and that is have 4 participants in this episode. And I am crossing my fingers that we don't have any audio issues. Probably just saying that is a bad idea, but we have with us today Paul, who's our usual co-host along with me. No introduction necessary there, but why don't you say hello anyway, Paul?
How's it going there? Good to be back, Clark.
And we also have Mike, who has appeared on a couple of our previous episodes. We tend to get Mike on any shows that we need to involve some controversy. Not sure that's going to happen today, but say hello, Mike. And
good to be here as well. Happy 2021.
Yes. And we will be talking about some 2020, 2021 type stuff. Ed Carrick also is joining us. Ed, you've been on the show before, episode 19, Beach Blanket Babylon, one of the more popular episodes. Ed,
oh, thank you.
Do you want to just, since it's been a while since we've heard from you, do you want to just give a quick introduction for yourself?
Sure. My name is Edward Carrick, and I've been a friend of Clark's for over 25 years. We met doing extra work at the opera. And done a lot of theater together and travel together. I've been to Japan when he was there, and I'm very, very happy to be invited to participate.
All right. Well, good. Thanks for joining us. So this is the first show. This is episode 40 of the We Talked About This podcast, and this is the first show for 2021. And I think it's probably safe to say many people have been waiting for 2020 to be in the rearview mirror. It's affected us in a lot of ways, some worse than others, but we're going to try not to dwell on that too much in this episode. What we did want to talk about to kick us off was what were the most popular search terms in 2020 according to Google. And you know, this list has been shared with all you guys, so there's no real surprises in that sense. I think what I was hoping to do here was just go through what those items are, and probably not a surprise to many of the listeners as to what the most popular search terms were. But Ed, I know when we were talking yesterday, you thought this was an interesting topic, and you might have some specific things to say about it.
Well, I can tell you, I work for Toronto Public Library, and we've done a variation of this. I'm not sure if it's still working or not, but there was a website you could go to that would show the popular search terms that people were putting into our website. So what people were searching for in terms of a library material. And there was some really strange things that would pop up, but at the same time, it would be very, very similar to any trending. But yeah, so we've done it at the library. I know people always have a curiosity on what other people are looking at, and also drives.
Well, okay, so it's no secret. I'm sure it's no surprise that the coronavirus is the number one most searched term in 2020. And that was followed by the election results. Number 2 is election results. And interestingly enough, when I did this search back in November, the number 1 search result was actually election, U.S. election. So this list in the last month even has bounced around a little bit. But what I found interesting about this list, and we'll share this in the show notes, is that the coronavirus, although it's number 1 on this list, there's actually 2 other terms relating to coronavirus that is in this top 10. So in the number 7 position, you have coronavirus update, and number 8 was coronavirus symptoms. So 3 items specifically mentioning coronavirus are appearing in this list. Then the other couple of the other items that are there, like Zoom, which was number 4, Google Classroom was number 10. I would argue those were also coronavirus related because they became tools that people were using in the during coronavirus and everyone going to online meetings. So if you count those, you have coronavirus at number 1, Zoom at number 4, coronavirus update at number 7, coronavirus symptoms at 8, and then Google Classroom in the 10th spot. We have 5 things in this top 10 search list are all coronavirus related, which I think is quite telling.
Well, it stands to reason. I mean, I don't think people have coronavirus news fatigue yet, but they certainly have, well, at least I certainly have Trump news fatigue. I mean, I could not care less. I didn't care less basically during the election. And so that has really dried up. I know that that will become aggravated again as we approach the 20th of the month. But after that, I hope he just falls into some kind of black hole of Calcutta and we never hear from him again. Because I couldn't, like I said, I maintain if the American people basically 50% of the American people voted for him, which to me is still a scandal as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Well, Trump tends to be the easiest way to turn this into a very political episode, and I don't want to do that. So, point taken.
Well, I can't imagine Mike ranting for Trump, although he might surprise us.
Yeah. So, like I said, let's steer away from Trump just for the sake of the Trump fatigue, as you mentioned. I think what stood out for me, though, was what wasn't on this list. I was very surprised that we didn't see Black Lives Matter or George Floyd in this, but for all we know, they're maybe 11th and 12th. For the amount of news that Black Lives Matter and George Floyd brought up, I was quite surprised actually that it didn't show up, that neither of those two terms showed up in this top 10.
Yeah, I'm really surprised to see that as well. The fact that Black Lives Matter didn't even make the top 10, that is kind of surprising. And there's a few on here that were surprising, which I'm sure you'll talk about in a second there, Clark. And I guess it's important to note that the list that you have in front of you is a global list.
Right.
So I think we kind of take for granted our news being North American focused.
Yep.
I guess if you really look at the larger global impact as to the true global news, the whole Black Lives Matter and George Floyd was relatively an American issue with the rest of the world taking interest in it. There's a few items on here which are very surprising because, well, there's one item here, number 5, IPL. I don't even know what that is. But apparently, globally, it was pretty important. Do you know anything about that one?
I meant to look it up. I actually meant to look at every term and make sure I knew what they were. Maybe one of the other guys can actually look up what IPL is, because I don't know. It is number 5 on the list after Zoom.
I looked at number 6, which was India versus New Zealand, and I'm assuming that's a cricket tournament or match or something.
It is, yes.
Considering how many millions of people are on that side of the world, it goes without reason that it must have been a pretty big deal.
Yeah, so I looked that up before, and India did do a tour of New Zealand for a cricket match. It went from, I think it was like December to March. It was some sort of a cricket tour. So yeah, clearly with the populations of especially India, that search term was enough to drive up. And the period of time involved, since it went from January to March, I guess, gave it enough data. The one thing that's kind of cool about the Google search, Google Trends, if you do ever Google it or look at Google Trends, is if you click into it, you can actually find out more information around it, like what months it actually spiked in popularity, whatever the term is. So I found that quite interesting when I was looking up, for instance, in the actors list, I looked up a couple of actors' names that were mentioned, and they showed like July. And that was because in July, that's when whatever the news was about that actor broke. So it's a kind of a cool way to see when did it spike, and you can watch how it kind of goes throughout the year. Anybody have IPL, Mike or Ed?
Well, I'll give you a hint. It's related
to
the one right below it, or India versus New Zealand. So India Premier League.
Okay.
Indian Premier
League. That's interesting that shows up as 5, and so those two things occupied the 5th and the 6th position. And again, I think it speaks to the popularity or just the number of people, 1.3 billion, I think, in India. So naturally, if there's a lot of interest in a country like that, it's going to drive up the numbers.
The one that I'm a little surprised with as to how it ended up as number 3 was Kobe Bryant. Obviously, when his tragic death back in, I believe it was February, I can understand probably there was a huge spike in interest, and that would have been right before coronavirus, so there wouldn't have been much else dominating the news headlines.
Yeah.
But for him to finish, for that topic to finish at number 3 for all of 2020, that's kind of surprising.
You think it should be lower?
Yeah, I would have thought. I'm not surprised it's in the top 10, but I'm surprised it made number 3, because perhaps there was such a spike in February that perhaps that influenced the overall 2020 numbers. I'm assuming so. And I guess there was interest in him throughout the year. And we just talked about how the news, global versus, I guess the North American focus. Perhaps Kobe Bryant did have a global appeal. I'm not sure.
Oh, I'm sure he did. And I think also because the NBA was a big topic last year with Black Lives Matter and with the whole NBA getting started as other sports did, I think Kobe Bryant, probably memorial type stuff, appeared in some NBA broadcasts and could have potentially sparked people's interest in looking up the name as the year was going on. Yeah,
that's true. And with Joe Biden on the list, I'm glad to see, kind of to echo Ed's point, I'm glad to see that Donald Trump was not on the list.
That's a bit surprising, actually, in a way, that he doesn't show up in this list.
To reason, because people don't need to.
No, it doesn't actually.
Well, people don't. You Google Donald Trump.
Did I Google Joe Biden?
Well, it's a lot of. You'd be amazed at the stupidity of people with me at the top of the list. Like when I looked at that list, how many things I actually had to Google. Now, speaking to to geographical media attention, I will tell you this: the Americans pay absolutely no attention whatsoever, zero, to media coverage that does not happen out of their country. It's proven. So, for example, if you speak to somebody even in intellectual parts of the U.S., heaven forbid there are so few, but you will basically be amazed that if you say, "Oh, in Canada this happened," they won't know what you're talking about, even if it was a major news item.
Well,
it's.
But would somebody in Japan know it? I mean, would somebody in
Japan is another
India?
Japan is pretty much a closed country as well. But
is someone in India going to know that Premier so and so did this? Or
I'm talking the English-speaking world. I mean, the Americans are very insular. They're very isolated.
Well, and the U.S. is also just south of the border too, so that would.
Yes.
Yeah, I get your point. Any other comments on searches for 2020?
What about what are you surprised did not make the list?
Well, Black Lives Matter and George Floyd.
Not murder hornets?
Yeah, that's something that did get talked about.
Yeah, actually the Beirut explosion would be a big one too.
Yeah, that too, yeah.
I mean, there really was quite a few things this year that were, the California wildfires were huge.
Right, yeah.
Well, Clark, you've attached a list of news items. Maybe we could talk about that, because there's some interesting ones on there.
Yeah, I mean, before we do that, let me just go back to Ed's point about search results, because you can drill down, and I love this Google Trends thing. I think it's so cool. I actually took a quick look at United States search results for 2020. Number 1 was election. Number 2 was coronavirus. Number 3 was Kobe Bryant. So Kobe Bryant was third in searches in the U.S. There were a couple other names that showed up, or things that showed up here that didn't hit the top 10, but ones that you could say, like Chadwick Boseman, that was a big deal. Him dying, he was number 9th. PlayStation 5 was number 10. I didn't hear too much about PlayStation 5 from where I was sitting. The rest of them are Zoom, coronavirus symptoms. Naya Rivera, I don't know who that is, but she was number 8.
Yeah, I think she was an actress who died, if I'm not mistaken.
Sorry, somebody was saying something before I stopped them. Was it you, Paul? Yeah, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to comment on the news items that you've included here, which is sort of a continuation of the Google searches. But this list here, is this the top Google news items? Maybe you could provide some background on this.
Yeah, so the top 10 Google news items. Yeah, coronavirus, election results. We had Iran, number 3, Beirut, 4. There was one that jumped out in the news. I've never heard of it. The Hantavirus? Hantavirus?
I had to Google search that one. I'd never heard of it either.
What is it?
So it's a virus spread by rodents, and it's flu-like symptoms. So maybe it's related to coronavirus, or maybe there's symptoms that mimic coronavirus. Either way, I'd never heard of it.
That's interesting.
Maybe it's a big deal in other parts of the world, for all I know.
What about you, Mike? Anything that's not on this list that you were surprised about?
No, not really.
What was it you mentioned? You said the wildfires, and you said something about, what was the other one? A port fire or something?
Oh, well, Beirut. That was huge. I mean, when you think, there seems to be, the Beirut thing followed a pattern, if you will, of port explosions that happened not too far apart in terms of, they seem like, as far as cutting news would concern, that they were distant. But if you look, you've got the Tianjin explosion, which was a huge port explosion. Then that one. They gave reasons for them, but I think there's something behind those. And of course, there's seems to be very little investigation. I remember Donald Trump being the only person that came out to say that the Beirut explosion was a terrorist act. Nobody else said that. It seemed like the entire world just fell into place saying that it was not. But the reason that amount of material was stored there is it is a fairly stable material. Yes, it can explode, but you don't store 20 tons of it if it's not stable. So it usually needs something to generate that high order explosion. You can't just set it on fire and it explodes. It's not like that. It's like a lot of high order explosives. They need an initiator, which suggests that there might have been someone involved to actually make that happen. But I don't know. It's just, right. I thought it was interesting. That was like the third or fourth one around the world at that time.
And Mike, being a pyrotechnics expert, you know your explosions, right?
Well, I know some. I would not call myself an expert, but I do have license, and I can do certain types of pyrotechnics in my job as a special effects technician in the film industry. But that's a whole other thing entirely. But it gives me a little bit of insight that maybe someone else wouldn't have.
Yeah, as we continue on this list here, again, a lot of news items that were related to coronavirus. I guess one could argue Hantavirus as an offshoot of coronavirus. Stimulus checks, unemployment, that pretty much goes without saying. Black Lives Matter did make that list. Tesla stock was number 8. I'm surprised at that one.
Do you know the backstory behind it? Its performance is astronomically positive if you own the stock.
I know that Tesla has obviously done quite well in terms of their sales, and a lot of that is sort of somewhat related to coronavirus. A lot of people with disposable income are spending money on toys. People that are not being able to travel. I know of a few people personally that decided to take the plunge and buy a Tesla. So,
well, off the top of my head, the stock's up like 500 to 700%. Their sales are up maybe 30%. Someone could check these stats. I'm not looking them up online right now, but it's something like they sold 300,000 vehicles. To give that a little bit of perspective, like Toyota sells something like 15 million. So it sounds like a lot, but it's a drop in the bucket. Their stock needs to their earnings to price to earnings ratio would require them to do the business they did this year for the next 160 years to equal the value of their stock, which is something like $700. It's nuts. It doesn't really make any. People are buying the stock based on a promise, not what it actually is right now. They think that maybe one day Tesla is going to corner the market in not only electric cars, but batteries for houses and space travel and space delivery outside of NASA and international communications with an array of satellites around the world, and none of which, I mean, these are all potentials, sure, but nothing is even close to being where it needs to be.
So what you're saying is that Elon Musk is going to take over the world or something?
No, that's what people hope, I think, based on the stock price, because it just doesn't equal reality right now. So, I mean, it would be great if you had bought it back when it was $25, but I mean, I wouldn't go near the stock right now. But that doesn't mean it won't double again. Stocks don't always make sense. Right now, the stock market doesn't seem to make sense to me. But it is what it is.
Well, there you have it. That's the Google 20 searches. And any final comments from anybody before we move on?
Good riddance, 2020.
Okay, we're going to move into something I'd say a little bit lighter. This was something that just occurred to me. I've been on this Facebook page. It's called Growing Up in the 70s or something like that. And it's about things, nostalgic things that people will post about growing up in the 70s or being a child of the 70s. And I happened to notice somebody wrote, what was something you ate in the 70s that you don't eat today? Or what was popular to eat in the 70s that you never hear about? And so a couple of things popped out from there. So there was pickled loaf bread, pineapple upside down cake, peanut butter and banana sandwiches were a few. So I wanted to just kind of throw it out there. Are there any foods that you remember eating as a kid that you couldn't even imagine eating today, or foods that you do eat today that you ate back then? Maybe they give you a certain level of comfort, or and then just the overall phenomenon is, are there certain foods that just kind of just go away and fade out into obscurity? Ed, you yesterday we were talking and you had said there's some foods you do like to eat because they make you feel good.
Well, I haven't done it in a long time, but I can certainly talk to foods that I ate as a kid. My mother would make Chef Boyardee on buttered toast.
On it?
Yeah. That was really something. Hot dogs with beans. These are luncheon meals. I mean, I try not to remember too much dinner because my mother actually was not that great of a cook. And so dinners were always tended to be very, very plain, and I didn't like them.
Well, I mean, you're saying that she made Chef Boyardee on toast, which is pretty much preparing.
Yes, prepared. Yes.
Yeah. Is that it? Is that it, Ed?
Well, those were two that came to mind, yes.
But what do you think about the whole, are there foods that just sort of drop out of the decade or period?
That happens all the time. I mean, when's the last time you had a Black Forest cake at someone's house? But in the 70s...
God, I hate it. Yeah, it was big.
They were quite common. I remember that.
I think confections tend to be more trending type things. For example, do you guys remember Dip It sticks?
Yeah.
See, you wouldn't find those now. So even chocolate bars or candy bars, have had their time, and definitely there is a difference between what you can get in Canada versus what you can get in the U.S. in terms of candy bars.
And I think there's also a trend away from kind of some of the processed foods. Like Eddie mentioned about the Chef Boyardee. Man, I used to eat that a lot when I was a kid. You crack open a can of Chef Boyardee or Alphagetti or whatever and make a nice, quick, easy meal.
Alphagetti, yeah.
Alphagetti, yeah. But kids these days aren't really, I don't know, certainly my son isn't not that interested in those foods. And I know it is very processed and there's probably a lot of sodium in there, so...
But is some of that because you're not providing it as an option, though? How would your kid know about Chef Boyardee?
No, I do ask. When we're at the grocery store, I'll ask, is this something you're interested in? It's like a treat once in a while type of thing. But it seemed to be a staple as to kids' diets back in the 80s or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Hot dogs.
Yeah. I mean, boiled hot dogs too.
Yeah, you're right. Now that I think of it,
tasty as a kid, but terrible as an adult.
What about molds? Like Aspic molds. When's the last
Those
time
are more 60s. By the time that my mother was cooking, she wasn't doing. She would make Jell-O.
Yeah,
and Jell-O is totally out.
That's a great example. Jell-O, yeah.
I don't think anybody makes Jell-O. The only time I think people make Jell-O is when they load it up with liquor, and you basically get it on cruise ships, right? To get you wasted. That's true.
My mom still makes Jell-O. She'll make it like she'll add milk to it, and it's like a recipe where it's like a frothy Jell-O type of arrangement.
That's really probably pretty extreme. She's probably the last of the line.
Milk and Jell-O? I've never seen that before.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it's actually really good. But like even stuff like the instant puddings, you don't really see them that much anymore. Whereas
Stuffed peppers.
Stuffed peppers, yeah, they're still around.
No, I know they're still around, but they were, I'd say, a once every 3 week item.
Yeah.
Back then, it would be a pepper stuffed with some concoction.
Ground beef.
Ground beef or rice or something. And to me, it's a once a year thing now at best.
Do any of you have a go-to comfort meal from your childhood that you have every now and then?
yeah,
No.
chicken fingers and macaroni and cheese.
Bean and bacon soup with toast, but now I can't have toast anymore, so just bean and bacon soup.
Why can't you have toast?
I'm allergic to gluten.
Oh, when did this occur?
Probably a year ago, but slowly started ramping up in the past, like the early half of this year. And it's not just gluten; it's also dairy, Ed. But that's a whole other podcast.
Jesus, what are you doing? Like blowing the barn door off your bathroom or something?
No, I just don't. I don't eat that stuff anymore. Actually, I feel a hell of a lot better for it. I'll tell you that much right now. I have lost weight. I feel better, but that's beside the point.
For me, it's peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I still once a year probably break one out and eat it, and or peanut butter and honey. I don't know if anybody had peanut butter and honey.
Oh yeah, it's great
No,
stuff.
never. That's a one I haven't heard of.
That one gets some eyebrows every now and then. Peanut butter and honey.
Wagon wheels.
Yeah, but wagon wheels are really not that good. Like that whole...
No, they're terrible.
It's interesting you mention that because there's so many foods out there, like those snack foods that you'd eat as a kid, like the Joe Louis and like those caramel cake things, and
Yeah.
there's so much stuff now.
caramel.
Yeah, all caramel. Yeah, stuff that
Oh, I
you
love
wouldn't
those.
like.
Flaky.
Flakies, Twinkies. There was a big thing about Twinkies last year that the company stopped making them, and then it turned into...
Now, we're all Canadian kids here, so if anybody listens to this in the United States, we had to watch your American cartoons during the holidays. Especially the Charlie Brown ones would be always sponsored by Sara Lee cakes. And we couldn't get those here, so we had to watch all these cakes. And,
We had Sara Lee cakes as kids.
well, not of the same kind that they were showing in the ads, though.
They had strawberry, vanilla, and chocolate, I seem to remember. And we would have them.
Those are the cakes that you got at the store, but there was these like little packets, if you would, that would come as individual things where the kids could have them for lunch. One was like apple turnover kind of thing.
Oh,
The one
yeah.
was like a cherry or strawberry. We didn't get those here. They were also in the ads of comic books where some villain would be destroying New York, and the Hulk and Spider-Man would throw them some of these Sara Lee cakes, and they'd be happy, and then take them away.
And I remember as a kid that fruit roll-ups were really, really popular, and I don't think you can get them anymore. I was never
Yeah,
a
you
big
can.
fan, but I knew a lot of people that really popular.
And just so you know, wagon wheels were actually originated in Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom. So I don't know that they ever made it to the U.S. So I was just trying to see if there was something that, like a comparable food that. But a wagon wheel was basically one wafer with a like a cookie almost with a layer of marshmallow, and then covered in chocolate. So. Mm-hmm. I remember one of my friends at school always had these in his lunch, and I would barter for them, like because my mother wouldn't put these into my lunch. So that's definitely that brings a lot of memories back for me. It was a highly touted snack in a kid's lunchbox that you could really barter for things or trade. It was a high trade item in the school lunchbox.
Man, that takes back memories, trading lunch items.
Cheese Whiz. That was another 70s thing. Cheese Whiz. God.
That's still around.
Well, it could actually be the stuff from the 70s still around. That stuff does not get bad.
Yeah.
It's horrible shit.
I'm more curious about this bartering idea. Like, what the hell were you doing? Like selling your tail for a wagon wheel?
Well, no, so when you got a lunch and you opened it up, and then you saw the kid sitting
Yeah.
next to you, and you saw that wagon wheel in the white package. I remember it came in a plain white package, and you looked down at your carrots and I don't know, maybe my mother used to like giving me those. They were like a cookie that had like a jelly inside of it, and they're really sweet. And I didn't.
The Peak Friends.
Yeah. Or what else did she used to give me sometimes? So the bartering, Ed, was just that maybe there was something I don't know. You could use it for a lot of things. Like maybe it was borrowing someone's baseball glove or something at the schoolyard, or a ball or something.
I was going to say, when you barter, the one thing that had no trade value was healthy foods like apples and carrots.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, I know something that my mother used to make that was highly touted at the schoolyard, and that was Rice Krispie Squares.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I was never a huge fan of them, but it was great for me because when they were in my lunchbox, I was always like, eh. But there were kids who would be right on me about that. So I was a high trade item.
I guess I never went through that trading phase. It stands to reason that it would exist, but yeah.
Ed, you just trade your lunch thing for someone else's lunch thing. Simple.
Okay, and then in junior high, we had a cafeteria, so they stopped my home lunches stopped. So I didn't have brought lunches after grade 6.
Sorry, what did I call the food company where for
Sara Lee?
Sara Lee.
Yeah, it wasn't Sara Lee, it was Dolly Madison.
Yes.
Now,
okay, yeah, no, we didn't have Dolly Madison.
That's why I was like, no, we didn't have it. Whatever they were selling.
And
Dolly Madison.
And the other thing that would make it into Canadian advertising, and I can tell you why it did, was Carvel.
Oh my God,
Carvel?
I used to love that guy. I love. Hello, Carvel Ice Cream. It's just wonderful. Wonderful time here. We got a special 14-layer cake here for all the kids. And if you would get it, his name's Pussyfoot. Pussyfoot, would you like to say hello? Hello, kids. Pussyfoot comes in a soft serve ice cream. It's delicious. I couldn't even do his voice justice. It's so gravelly and awesome.
Google that stuff. It's got to be in the Google search.
We'll find it.
Well, they had molds, and those molds would be turned upside down and reused in different ways. Like, if it was done right side up, it would be like a pumpkin with a hat. But you turn it upside down, and all of a sudden it's like a clown with a big nose, that type of thing. So, yeah, they were... Anyway, I never made it there once in real life. I always wanted to, but never did.
Now's that part of the show where we talk about an unofficial sponsor for our episode. And Paul, let's start with you. You had a product you wanted to talk about today.
I did. This was actually a Christmas gift that I got, was wireless earbuds. I like to run, just like Clark, you and I both like to run. You can relate to this. Having earbuds to enjoy while I do running, it's something that was sort of on my wish list. And my wife was always wondering how I could run without any kind of listening to music or anything like that. So I've decided to join the 21st century and have wireless earbuds for my running.
Do you have a make for it, or you still don't know?
No, I'm not sure what the make. I don't think it's a name brand or anything like that, but wireless earbuds, just the product in general. I'm very much looking forward to being able to enjoy this product.
Ed, what about you? You had a product you want to talk about.
Yeah, well, one of the things that happened with me is you comped me a week's worth of food from HelloFresh. So I've just finished making the last meal. And I'd have to say, I registered for the 2-people meal. So there's plenty of food for one person. Like, you have basically, leftovers and stuff like that. And if anything that keeps me from being obsessed or with being addicted to ordering is good, as far as I'm concerned, because I got a bit of a problem with ordering in food. I just don't know what the price point is yet. I've just had my first box delivered, basically. I haven't checked my Visa to see what they charged me for it to find out if it actually makes financial sense.
Where would you order food in from, Ed?
Oh, Christ, you name it. My neighbor, because I moved, right, within the building, my neighbor basically said, she's going to miss the smell of pizza going past her apartment, basically, as the, delivery boys, basically. But I stopped actually ordering food around the end of the summer, and I noticed a huge difference financially.
I see. 'Cause I never saw any of those posts on Facebook.
Of?
Ed's famous order in...
Oh yeah, no. I don't post. I don't humiliate myself and post on Facebook basically what I order in. I only brag about what I cook. But you know what? With COVID, I mean, as a matter of fact, with the exception of Mark, you and Carolyn were my last guests.
Yeah, I think you're going to enjoy HelloFresh. I've been using HelloFresh now for about 2 months now, and I really enjoy it because it allows you to cook meals that are maybe a little bit out of your comfort zone, stuff that you wouldn't normally cook yourself or wouldn't really think of as a recipe to try.
Like Baked Alaska?
Well, yeah, there's some interesting things in there that can surprise you as to how good they are. There's some
examples, Paul.
Well, there's like
you've got hundreds of people here wondering what the hell you're talking about.
Pan-seared chicken meals and like stuffed meatballs, and there's all sorts of interesting stuff.
Stuffed meatballs?
Yeah.
Stuffed with what?
With cheese. I make a stuffed meatball that would send you around the bend.
Well, if you want that, you just order from Hello Ed. All right, guys, we got to go. That's a wrap.
Okay, just all right. Before you finish yapping your mouth, I just noticed the posting basically for HelloFresh on my Visa. So it's $80. So for $80, it's a price point's around $25 a meal. That's a lot. That's a little bit on the
well. When you consider that they shopped for you, they meal planned for you, they delivered it to your door.
Yeah, but these are also skills that basically people should have, especially if they live alone. I completely understand it if you're a person who lives with a young family.
And as well, it's $25 of reasonably healthy food rather than, pizza or whatever you're going to get.
Okay, HelloFresh. I know you sponsor other podcasts, so feel free to sponsor us.
Now it's time, it's Father's Day. Instead of shirts and ties, Daddy, I'm giving you this Carvel cake, 'cause you're my favorite guy.
Fudgy the Whale for Father's Day. Yeah, that's a great gift for Dad. Please visit your participating Carvel Ice Cream store, and while you're there, you know what else you can get him? Fudgy the Whale doll. Have a happy day, Dad. Thank you.